Hello everyone, I'm Tracy Derwin and I'm here with Shane Buell. In today's video, we're going to be going over the past, I'll say 4 or 5 days of unusual weather events, including the fires in Oklahoma, including the area of Stillwater, the unusual underground fire at Texas Tech, the dust storms in Kansas, and all of the destruction, like the accidents, the big rigs falling down because the drivers couldn't see, and that actually led to people dying. And then also the fire warnings that are going on all over the country, even in Florida, areas where you don't typically think of fires. There's these red flag warnings. So we're going to be going into that a little bit. So I'll let Shane start out with this unusual, or you're going to go over the kind of the big picture, and then we'll go into that green fire that was coming out of the ground.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, Tracy. So last week was a very busy week, and I'm only going to cover up to the 14th in this video. And then in our next video, we're going to cover the events of the 14th and 15th. So a lot of things unusual happened last week, but it all started with this green fire that happened at Texas Tech University in Lubbock, Texas. And we actually have a video of that I'm going to show you here. So yeah, you can see there's a manhole cover and there's like violent green flames shooting out, and it's actually moving the manhole back and forth. So that tells me that it's got a lot of pressure to it, perhaps even a decent amount of fuel. Now it looks like a gas fire, but it's got a green flame, and that green flame is it can't be too many different things. I did a little bit of research, and it could be zinc. And there's also a combination of zinc with an incendiary that I won't mention here on YouTube that is capable of producing these green flames, especially when it comes into contact with water. So there is a mixture of zinc powder with an incendiary that can be activated by water. So I kind of think this could be a gas fire. I doubt that it's electrical fire, but it could also be a chemical fire, more specifically chemical arson of some sort using zinc powder. But it's hard to say. I doubt this is methane. Methane doesn't burn green like that. So it's really anybody's guess. But that was a really strange fire, and someone could have probably filled a book bag or backpack full of zinc and the other powder and threw it down in the sewer and would have a result like this.
And I also know they closed the school down for, I think, until spring break, like a week. So I
Yeah,
think they
yeah.
know
So Texas
something.
Tech was closed, and so I wouldn't put it past that it could possibly be a student just trying to get out of school, but there could be a more nefarious reason behind this. There could be some sort of, you know, arson or whatever involved. All right. So that was on the 12th of March, and then the very next day, on March 13th, there was a dust storm that caused a bunch of accidents in Texas. And I actually have some footage here to show you. These are the semi trucks that were being flipped over by the wind. And so the wind was strong enough to push the semi trucks over, as you see here. But the dust storm also caused visibility issues. So once you had flipped trucks that were crashed on the road, people couldn't see them and they drove right into them, causing a pileup. And the pileup in Texas on Highway 87 ended up causing 4 deaths. And so, yeah, you see just how windy it was there, and it kept flipping the trucks. A couple of the trucks actually recovered. I think this one here actually does recover, believe it or not. But yeah, that was a close call. All right. So yeah, 4 people died in Texas on Highway 87. And the same thing happened in Kansas as well on I-70, where 55 vehicles crashed and left 8 people dead. So it was a very dangerous dust storm. But then they also on the 13th, they had predicted fire warnings for this area. So this is the NOAA Fire Weather Outlook, and you can see that it covers New Mexico, Texas, Oklahoma, some of Arkansas. And that actually is relevant because these are the areas that pretty much caught on fire the very next day on the 14th, which is known as Pi Day. We also had a full blood moon lunar eclipse, and it's also the first day of Mercury retrograde for those astrology buffs out there. But anyway, this did affect New Mexico, Texas, Oklahoma, Colorado, Arkansas, Missouri, and South Dakota. New Mexico had 15,000 acres that burned. Texas had over 60,000 acres that burned, very near the Smokehouse Creek fire from last year, which was 1 million acres. And then Colorado Springs had 2,500 acres that burned right next to the Schriever Space Force Base. This isn't the first time we've seen fires right next to a base. We saw Lawrence Livermore National Laboratories had a fire, and then just a week or two ago, Brookhaven National Laboratories had a fire as well. South Dakota had a giant fire, almost 40,000 acres. But the real story is Oklahoma, which had 140 separate fires totaling 170,000 acres. And the one area that got hit the hardest was the area around Stillwater. Now, here you can see the Stillwater area is actually between all these fires. The most affected communities were Stillwater and Manford and a town called Leedy. However, this is the Stillwater area. Stillwater is right in the middle of this picture, and you can see that there's fires between Stillwater and Tulsa and between Stillwater and Oklahoma City. All right, so now I want to go into some of the videos of this fire, and we have some news reports from the week before, and I put a bunch of clips together from the week previous to the fire.
The fire danger here is already at high, but as the week goes on, this dial will likely move even further. It's an all-hands-on-deck kind of week for Oklahoma City firefighters.
We're off and running on wildfires now.
We've been talking about that fire risk.
Meteorologists expect near hurricane-strength winds to sweep across Oklahoma later this week, and no rain in the forecast. Not an ideal combo.
We're really looking at the high winds and the low humidity. Those are two factors that we're looking at for the high wildfire danger days.
This week, Oklahoma Forestry Services warns there is an increasing probability of a wildfire outbreak across the region, particularly on Friday.
We expect any fire that starts on that day to be extremely difficult to control.
Even a tiny spark, a discarded cigarette, sparks coming from a trailer chain.
Or even your car. Chopper 4 captured it last year when Oklahoma City police cruisers burst into flames after parking on tall grass during a chase.
We've even had some outdoor welders that was welding on a fence, and these sparks were flying over on some dead grass, and then we were taken off on a large grass fire.
This week, the fire department's bringing in special wildfire task force teams to get ahead.
And really could be a dangerous weather day just with the strong winds and the grass fire potential. For us locally, as far as a severe weather threat is concerned on Friday, we've been watching this closely. It might stay just far enough to the east that we don't have to worry about severe weather here locally, but we are concerned about the grass fire risk, and that is going to be at a critical level. And again, you got winds gusting 45 to 65 miles per hour. That's enough to knock a few things over as well. We could have some power outages with how windy it is going to be.
OG&E is also getting ready for the potential that we have outages because of the strong wind. They say they've adjusted their schedules and they're warning people stay away from any downed power lines.
Preparations are underway across eastern Oklahoma as the threat of a highly destructive fire looms. Thanks for joining me at 10. I'm Brody Myers. All week, I've been talking with rural fire departments gearing up for Friday's threats.
The state of Oklahoma will be experiencing weather conditions that could result in possible grass fires. I'm Isabel Flores with 2 News Oklahoma, and I spoke to several fire agencies that tell me they're most worried about high winds combined with drier areas like this. Charlie Pearson is the chief of the Rock Volunteer Fire Department in Osage County. He tells me dry vegetation doesn't only make it easier for fires to start, it makes it easier for them to last longer, too. I also spoke to Andy James, the fire management chief for Oklahoma Forestry Services.
It's so widespread. It's going to cover about 3/4 of the state where we have our highest area of concern, but it doesn't mean that we can't see fires in all 77 counties.
James tells me states like Montana, Idaho, Arkansas, Louisiana, and even Georgia pitched in resources to help prepare.
I mean, there shouldn't be any smoke in the air tomorrow other than, a wildfire. I would highly discourage any type of outdoor burning tomorrow. I'm talking charcoal grills, anything of that nature.
Please do not be burning anything today, tomorrow, over the weekend, because we're going to get back into some wind situations next week, and clean out around your houses.
The Rock Fire Department will have 26 firefighters on standby to respond to any emergencies that may arise.
Michael, definitely, we talked about this day a lot this week. We knew it was going to be bad. It absolutely was.
All right. So that last clip was actually from the day of, but all those other clips were from the day before.
Yeah. And I want to just point out that they knew, I mean, I'm convinced they knew this was going to happen just because of all those warnings. And I'm seeing a pattern. We saw that with LA. We're seeing it with most of the fires nowadays. And it really bugs me. This makes me so upset how they are blaming people for this. You're welding, you're having a barbecue, you're smoking a cigarette. Even driving your car is a cause for these disasters. And it's been going on, this kind of like gaslighting of the public, saying that it's our fault, our fault for living. And you know, that famous Smokey the Bear, only you can prevent a forest fire, you know, because if it weren't for you all, these wouldn't be
Because
happening.
it's us. Yeah,
But
that's what
they
they're implying.
know, they already knew that this was going to happen.
Right.
And
Yeah. That's one of the things that stuck out to me, not just the gaslighting of the public, because they do that a lot. They try to blame it on us in our everyday activities. But it looks like not only the Oklahoma Forestry Service, but Oklahoma Gas and Electric, or OG&E, they also were preparing for that ahead of time. So, yeah, they were putting out a lot of propaganda from the Oklahoma Forestry. And even OG&E said, if you see a down power line, don't go near it, you know, call 911, because they were planning on power lines coming down. And
right.
that is actually what is being implicated in this fire once again, just like on Maui.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly what we heard there. But yeah, I just
Yeah.
wanted to let people know, like, don't let that affect you. And I don't want people to live in fear that by just, you know, doing simple things that, you know, it's going to be you that causes the next disaster. It's the propaganda that's making you feel responsible for it. So
Right.
yeah, I
Yeah.
want to say that.
And it turns out, it looks like it's actually, the responsibility is probably going to be pinned on OG&E, Oklahoma Gas and Electric. And I do have a clip from the officials in their press briefing. And we have the governor here, who actually did lose his house in this fire. And we also have one of the representatives from FEMA, who says something very interesting at the end.
Have you considered asking power companies in the future to maybe look at cutoffs ahead of situations like this?
You know, yes, and they did de-energize some lines, and so we're still trying to track down how do these fires start. We think there were some controlled burns that was happening a few days before, and some things got out of control. We think some of the power lines contributed to this, so that's something that I personally want to look at.
We worked diligently beginning actually last Friday with the Oklahoma Forest Service to start preparing for this event.
All right. So as you saw there, she said that they had been working with, so FEMA was working with the Oklahoma Forest Service, which was the organization putting out all that, you know, propaganda ahead of time. So they were working together for the full week ahead of that, preparing for the event. So,
and this is something we also see. They say we're going to turn the power off, but they don't.
Right.
They're like, oh, the winds are so bad, we're going to turn the power off. But like in LA, they didn't. Lahaina, they didn't. They even said they didn't.
Right. And I think part of the reason is so that the power company can be set up to take the fall. So there is, you know, just like every time we have a fire where they blame the power lines, the power company is held responsible, and then they pin it all on them. And there's probably a lot of insider trading that goes on. You know, these power companies are set up to take the fall, and they're all owned by BlackRock in the first place. So, you know, you got Hawaiian Electric Company owned by BlackRock. You got PG&E owned by BlackRock, and the same thing is true of OG&E as well. All right, so now we're going to get into the footage of these fires. So this is Stillwater, Oklahoma in Payne County, and this is on the 14th, Thursday the 14th, also known as Pi Day. You can see how most of these houses were burning very intensely. Yeah, and then so it didn't spare very many houses in the area where it burned, but every now and then, you know, you'll see where it did jump a house. And also there's houses that are burned in the middle of green areas too, where the only thing that has burned is the house. And I'll show you that here in just a minute. Here's another clip. Now I want you to look at this flag. Look how close this flag is to the house, but the flag didn't actually burn at all. That tells me that it was probably a microwave safe flag, because it should have caught fire being that close to the house. If everything else on the house except for the brick caught fire, the flag should have caught fire too.
And then on the Stillwater fires, I got a lot of emails, a significant amount of emails of people from the area or people that used to live in the area that said that it's very unusual, and they asked me to look into it because this is not typically what happens at this time of year. In July and August, maybe, but they think it's just it's very atypical.
Yeah. Speaking of unusual, we have another anomaly to show you. And this is a metal water drain that goes under the road, or like a culvert. And you can see that it's actually on fire. This was actually in between two fires. They were driving from one fire to the other when they came upon this in the middle of nowhere.
We came up on this just now, and there's fire burning on both sides of the road right here. We don't know if there's a pipe that runs under this, if there's just a bunch of maybe trash in some sort of drainage ditch that runs under the road. But look at that. That is crazy. That's happening right in front of us. This is on Coffee Creek, okay? And I'll tell you where we're at. Let me get the crossroad in here. We're just east of Henny Road, okay? And this is wild. I mean, we just had several emergency vehicles pass by us very quickly, and we just sit here, and all of a sudden when the wind gets in there and basically, look at that. So it all of a sudden it ignites, and I mean, look how intense those flames are, and it's literally right by the side of the road. I mean, we're gonna have to be really careful even to just get by this. We were actually trying to move out of this area and go up to the fire that's just southeast of Guthrie, closer to Meridian. But then we came across this, and it's like, oh my gosh, I don't know.
So I just wanted to point out a couple of things. So we don't know if that was a metal culvert. We don't know if there was a culvert. It just kind of looked like it because of the wind was blowing it out. And also the smoke was black. So that indicates fuel or something else. But the strength of that fire was really strong. I mean, I guess the wind could cause that. But I guess the force of the fire, to me, is very unusual.
Yeah, I assume there was like a wind tunnel effect going on through the tunnel, whatever it was made of. However, we've seen in past fires like Paradise and so forth that the metal culverts underneath actually did catch fire, and they had replaced them with plastic ones. So that's just an interesting thing to know, although we don't officially know the material that it was made of. All right. So now we have some more damage that I want to show you, and this is also in Stillwater, Oklahoma, and this is a house that was completely reduced to rubble. The only thing that's left are the steel cross beams. I think this might have been perhaps a mobile home or a double wide, judging by the steel frame down there. But the ashes are completely white. The frame is even bent in some places, like drooping. So if that's a steel frame and it's drooped like that, then we're talking temperatures close to 3,000 degrees, 2,500 to 3,000 degrees. All right, and then I have another clip to show, and this is like another mobile home looking thing, and you can see the metal frame underneath, and then the metal panels around have come off. They are green in color, which is interesting. It looks like the green had survived a little bit better. There's a small shipping container that you could see there, which was the sheet and post style shipping container. The aluminum sheet on the outside is completely melted off, leaving only the steel posts on the inside. And then as he zooms out, you can see how this area is relatively green around it. And then here's another area where you can see the structure here is just completely reduced into a footprint of white ash. And then he also zooms in on some of these trees, which are missing their leaves, but a lot of them have like a gray or a white color to them, which is something I don't usually see on trees that burn. Usually in a forest fire, you should have black trees. But here we see a lot of white and gray ash on the ground. And then here's a structure in the middle of a green area with nothing around it that's burned. So the ember that must have caught this on fire had probably traveled quite some distance, if that's indeed the case, as to what ignited this fire. But as you see, there's a structure here that's burning, and nothing around it for at least a quarter mile is burned at all. So it's really weird. An ember, if this was caused by an ember, it would have had to fly at least a quarter to a half mile, because there are no fires near this structure except for the structure itself.
Yeah.
All right. Now we have some more close-ups. This isn't quite as good quality of a video. It's a little bit grainier, but you can see just how completely destroyed the homes were. The only things that survived were stone, brick, and steel for the most part. And then here's a commercial structure, which does have some black on it. And then here's some more residential areas. The structure itself is in a white footprint. And there are some trees here. And there's even water pouring out of this house there. You know, you can see water pouring out. So they did have pressure, but it looks like some of the water lines were breaking.
I know I noticed there wasn't a lot of firefighters, at least in the footage that we saw, and a lot of water or water drops. I didn't see a lot with the Oklahoma fires.
That's true. So some states like Oklahoma don't typically have fires as often as other states like California. And so in the press briefing, you could tell that the governor seemed a little bit, I guess, inexperienced when it came to, you know, forest fires in general. And he said that, you know, they're going to try to learn from the other states that have more fires, which kind of implies that they don't typically have as many fires as some of the other states do.
Right.
Yeah. So they probably just don't have the practice at fighting forest fires like they normally do. Plus, I did also hear that their resources were strained. They did get help from neighboring states. Neighboring states had even pledged to send help the week ahead of time before the fires even happened, but they were still very strained on resources. And so a lot of the firefighters, they actually stayed close to where they were home base, where they were based out of, and they didn't actually travel too far from where they were because they were just overwhelmed. They said there was only so much they could do. All right. We do have another video that shows some deer fleeing from the flames. And this kind of reminds me of the elk fire in Wyoming, where there were, you know, other elk and deer that were fleeing the flames as well. So yeah, our prayers go out to the animals as well as the people that were affected in this. Although there were 100 injuries, there were no actual deaths reported. So that's actually a very good thing. So now I'm going to skip back up to the evacuation zone here. So this is the evacuation zone for Stillwater. And you can see that it reaches all the way up to 6th Street. The evacuations were lifted on the east side or the northeast side of this map, but everything else that's in the brown is still under mandatory evacuation. And that brings me to the next subject, which actually touches on smart cities. So we had a viewer that tipped us off to this post, and it says that there has been another fire in Stillwater, Oklahoma. And he says, are we surprised? Because we shouldn't be. Because if you look back far enough, the 15-minute city concept urban planning, where all essential services are within a 15-minute walk or bike ride, has been floated in Oklahoma as part of a broader sustainability initiative. Stillwater, home to Oklahoma State University and a growing population of almost 50,000 people, was a candidate for a pilot program under a 2024 state grant proposal titled Oklahoma Smart Growth 2030. Now, I did look into this and I found one of the documents that he mentioned. So this one he just mentioned, I actually did find. It's called the Oklahoma 2030 Strategic Vision Plan. And it does actually specifically list Stillwater as one of the places that's included in their plans. Going back to this post, he does also go on to say that we can basically surmise at the basic rundown as to the protocol given that we know how they usually respond to such incidents. Displace residents, devalue land, and justify rezoning for compact, high-density development aligned with 15-minute city principles. He goes on to say a shadow memo dated February 3rd, 2025 from an entity called Praxis Urban Solutions, a front company, outlines Stillwater as a soft target for controlled disruption to accelerate urban redesign. And so I did look into this. I couldn't find the exact document that he was talking about, but I did find the subject of chaos engineering, which he mentioned, and it is actually a thing. And it involves, you know, instituting chaos into a region so that it can be fast-tracked for redevelopment. I'm not going to read all the details of this, but if our audience is curious about chaos engineering, there's a lot of information out there about it. All right, so he also mentions that there was satellite imagery that apparently shows a planned containment line along Range Road, subtly reinforced with fire retardant chemicals that were pre-dropped on March 13th before the fire, ensuring that the blaze spared key infrastructure such as the Stillwater Community Center, which was slated for 15-minute city hubs. All right, so I do have some videos on we covered the Tulsa Smart City before. This is a clip by Dr. Julianne Romanello, and she goes into a little bit more details. In this clip, she's actually talking about the Tulsa Smart City.
Tulsa's not a smart city. We're in Oklahoma. We're a red state. No, we absolutely are a smart city, and that's because the new economy that is envisioned by the Sustainable Development Resetters, it is one that runs on data. Is a comprehensive framework for implementing the UN Sustainable Development Agenda. Globalists are not very creative people. They use the same plans, they use the same patterns, they use the same images and words over and over again. So if we look at this one issue of transit-oriented development, I believe you'll have a tool with which you may use to identify and evaluate other programs. Or if any of you have heard of it before, in short, it's a plan to take away your car and force you to use a bicycle or to walk to work, controlling people who are going to be suffering economically. And it relies on digitalization and 4IR technologies, which are going to be governed by AI and deployed to automate cognitive processes, detect, predict, and respond to people's behaviors and customers' needs. So what is a smart city? This is again, from the UN. A smart city uses information and communication technologies and other means to improve quality of life, efficiency of urban operation and services, and competitiveness, while ensuring that it meets the needs of the present and future generations with respect to economic, social, and environmental aspects. So all of those devices are going to exchange data, and that will be stored in the cloud and recorded to a permanent digital ledger on blockchain. You sell it to people. You say, oh, we're going to have a 15-minute city, and it's going to be lovely. You're never going to have to leave your 15-minute zone. Extensive data collection, urban densification, stack and pack. You can see them going in all over. They want to decrease travel beyond district lines. And the last two sort of merge together into you'll own nothing and be happy. Until you realize that you're not going to be able to leave your district. So like what business, food and housing, all of these are going to be tied together through the Internet of Things, which is going to be, remember, that's the sensor network that communicates back and forth with everything and the cloud in order to do what? To give a picture of your human capital score. Okay, so that's American speak for social credit scoring. Everything that you do is going to be judged on the basis of its future economic potential. You're going to make that decision, like how to evaluate the future use of your activities. It won't be us, it will be AI.
All right. So as we saw there, not only does Tulsa have plans for a smart city, but Stillwater itself actually does here as well, as you can see in that graphic. All right. So now the other thing that I wanted to mention was that there are several mines actually surrounding the Stillwater area. This area has traditionally been copper mining, but they also have silver, silica, titanium, molybdenum, chromium, etc. And silica is very popular, especially for computer chips, and copper is still one of the most popular minerals that's used for wiring in electronics. All right. And that's all I have for today. So back to you, Tracy.
So I did want to comment like overall, because I know we have a lot of new viewers. So we've been talking about these fires and unusual weather and different events, and everything from tornadoes to floods. But these are complicated ideas. What's going on is a complicated process, and it usually involves a complicated explanation. Rarely is something like this explained with one reason. So even just looking at these fires, I think in Lahaina, we identified maybe 5 different things that were happening. So everything from a man with a blowtorch in a field could be a cause, and up to the changing of the environment, and things that are going on in the earth that aren't fully understood in the way that maybe some people above understand it. So I did want to, that's the way I look at things. I don't think things are black and white. I think the majority of things are gray. So that's where I kind of exist, is using different explanations to make sense of things. So, I know it's easier to use one explanation for a complicated problem, but very rarely is that the case. So yeah, it's something I've been thinking about for a while. So, you know, when we're looking at, for example, Stillwater, there's a lot of things going on. You know, there is this strategic plan, there is mining, there is everything from the lunar eclipse that was happening at the same time. Things that I don't understand, but this is not something that can be explained even, you know, in a simple video. And so that's kind of what I want my channel to be about, is to look at various different things. Oh, from the spraying, you know, it's a lot more varied and layered than I think a lot of people think. So yeah, that's really it's been on my mind for a while. So yeah, I think that's going to do it. So thank you, Shane, so much for digging up all this information. A lot has been going on. A lot is still going on. And I think things are going to happen even today, into this week. So we'll try to stay on top of it and report what we can. So with that, thank you guys so much for being here, and we'll see you all soon. Bye.